What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today, and we're going to go over a Nectar premium deck profile, specifically Musketeers with Cecilia Reverse. So you may be wondering, like, wait, what? Commander Jaime doing a Nectar deck profile, and it's actually really cool. If you play Grand Blue and you really enjoy the like in-depthness and of course like the skill level that you have to learn to get really good with the deck, this is very similar in that aspect too. And this actually really excites me to show you off. This is more of a fun deck that I've been messing with behind the scenes kind of thing too, and we're gonna go into some of the details, some of the card choices, show off some of the key plays too, and kind of go from there. So let's get right into it. Check out Nex LvL Gaming's playmats, and they actually have a lot of mats with your favorite units. They're great quality playmats too as well, and you can use the affiliated link as a 10% discount on your next purchase. Also, I've become an official Metafy coach for Cardfight Vanguard, and so if you ever want to get one-on-one time with me to help your skill level, go ahead and book a session with me. I can help with premium format, standard, or even clans like Force and many others, and even YouTube as well. I just want to help fellow amigos and make an impact within the community itself. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot me a message too. You can use the link down below in the description to book your session as well. Two real quick shout outs. First off, David Song for even mentioning this deck to me. I actually expressed thoughts that I may look into a different clan in premium, and he has suggested Musketeers, and I appreciate his patience with actually explaining me the combos, especially via Discord. It's just super helpful just being able to understand the intricacies of the deck that it has. And then also a YouTuber that's up and coming as well, Casual, with capital L at the end too. I'll put the description, the link in the description so you guys can see his content. He's a new YouTuber with premium Cecilia Reverse content. So he actually does his own deck profile. He does even a combo video. Very good at it, very intricate, and he has a good way of explaining things too, so I definitely recommend that too. And also shout out to David's friend that actually has the deck, and they brainstormed to work this together too, so shout out to him as well. I just don't know his name or her name. But anyway, with what the deck even does is that Cecilia Reverse has an amazing second skill. So I'll kind of talk about the costs first because it's very specific. It's either Vanguard Circle or front row rearguard circle, and so it's a once per turn at the end of the battle that your rearguard with Cecilia in the name that actually was placed from deck attacks a grade 3 or greater Vanguard. Very specific. You can counterblast one, lock 2 standing rearguards, and then stand it. And if you so happen to have a front row locked card, then you can bind this card and write it instead to Vanguard, which is really cool because then it starts generating force markers. I was about to say excels. Must be the rebel in me. So, but the force markers, you want to go force 1 because you start piling these, which is ridiculous. As much more the game goes longer, the more force markers you're going to have. Like, it's easy to get to 4 force markers by your second stride. And then if you scale even more by then as well, or even the next turn, it's just ridiculous too. And what's really cool is you get another Vanguard attack if the Vanguard already attacked. And so that's why it's very vital for you to be able to kind of like do the attack patterns appropriately. And also fetch the combo pieces with the toolbox that this deck provides. It does have a toolboxing kind of aesthetic, especially like Grand Blue, where you get your pieces from your deck and put them into the drop zone. Nectar specifically with the deck, and then it does have cards to recycle some cards back into deck too as well, so that way you don't run out of resources, and you can return even Cecilia Reverses and other Cecilia cards to be able to keep doing the skill because it's not a hard once per turn. So you can actually do this per Cecilia Reverses copies essentially. So it's possible to you to get 2 rewrites to have a total of 3 Vanguard attacks, and if you figure it out to get to the 4th Vanguard attack, let me know. But yeah, but as you may know, you're locking 2 units, and then this goes onto the Vanguard circle. There's only so many attacks, and in fact they require to be standing, so it's really awkward. And that's where this stoicheia grade 3 comes into play, Usurp Dragon. And so that's when your grade 3 or greater Vanguard is placed. This calls itself from the drop zone, so this lets you actually kind of fetch those bodies during the battle phase, kind of like Raging Form almost from Revengers. You may be retiring stuff or removing stuff, but now you're starting to get stuff back, I guess, to either fodder for more relocking or just attacks and retirement as well. So it goes hand in hand with the Cecilia's first skill too. When it attacks, you can retire 2 units, check the top 5, call it to 2. Which has like a decked in aspect. You can also get another Cecilia Reverse, which then can get you to the 3rd Vanguard attack that way, because you're kind of extending into the deck to get the second copy. And of course, the Usurp Dragon serves as retire fodder on top of that. So it's really cool synergy in this case. Essentially, you will attack, counterblast, and do the locking mechanic, and it will rewrite and get your force marker, right? And so what's really cool too with the token specifically, I want them to actually point these out, is that when you lock a token, it disappears. So there's no like lock card where it's actual token, it just disappears. I will show a high roll play that actually makes use of this synergy, so that way you can extend further as well. So this is really nice that tokens can just like disappear in that sense too. So I just wanted to point that out. The last thing that Musketeers or just Neo Nectars in general has is a card called Rain Breath Dragon, and there's also the GB1 flip G-Guard, but essentially you can call a card from hand when you G-Guard. And so you have that synergy where you can call certain units to do certain actions. Good examples are Hanali, you got Bell against the Narukami matchup. You can also have some of the synergy with the Musketeers, such as the grade 2 Sau, and I do play Alania as well, which is the grade 2 stoicheia grade 2. So you can start calling cards during your opponent's battle phase while you're G-guarding. And potentially with Sau, it can activate a trigger as well. So then all of a sudden, you can activate triggers during your opponent's turn while you're guarding, and depending on what it may be, it could be an over trigger too. More than likely, it might be a heal or a draw or a crit, but it's still just like nice to be able to do that. And then you can just intercept with those cards too. So you have some kind of like defensive interaction too during your opponent's turn. Right now, Neo Nectar, or just I guess stoicheia in general, doesn't have a unit where it's on place, kill something or remove something. So there's no removal in that aspect. It's just more of the other stuff that you can still kind of mess with. So just keep in mind, it's not like Cannoneer with Grand Blue where you can have access to retirement. Only Grand Blue has that access to. But I thought I mentioned this out because there is some synergy in that way. And I almost forgot. I wanted actually to highlight these two cards because they're essential. Because the next question is like, can you consistently fetch a Cecilia Reverse from deck to be able to do the skill in general? And you have this right, Ladislava. I have empathy now for all the Neo Nectar players that for years you guys have been struggling. For real. The Stride Zone, as we get to that part, you'll start seeing that there's not really much pizzazz or power from it. It's more utility based at this point, and so really your grade 3s like Cecilia Reverse are really like the power of the deck. And its skill is discard one card from hand and then choose one of your rear guards, and then you can search up to 2 cards of the same grade. It's basically you add to hand and then you call the rest. And so you add whatever other grade 3, it could be your SERP, it could be a grade 3 Heal Guardian, and you call the Cecilia Reverse, so that way you have Cecilia Reverse from deck ready to go during your main phase, easily set up on just striding. Super impactful. Maiden of Sweetberry in the G era form is really cool. It's an act, it's a 0 cost, but essentially this can go back to deck. You choose one of your units and actually search a copy from that from the deck and call it to Rearguard Circle. So if you write Cecilia Reverse, your Stride, or even just that being on Vanguard, and if you're GB1, you can search the other copy of Cecilia Reverse and put it on the field and you're good to go. So I just wanted to stress these two because this is what really makes the deck even consistent in premium to make it even worth playing in that sense too. On to the grade 3s. We are playing 4 Cecilia Reverse, 2 the regular Cecilia, 4 grade 3 heals, and we're playing 2 Usurp Dragons for a total of 8 grade 3 normal units and the triggers for 4. Shout out to 50 Card Shop for the Cecilia Reverse SPs. They look phenomenal and I actually picked them up, so thanks again. And he even got most of the Musketeer stuff that I needed to as well, so check out 50 Card Shop and use the code Jaime for a 5% discount as well. But with that, you want to maximize Cecilia Reverse because it's like the main card that you want to use and find from your deck searches, and also ride as Vanguard just to make your stride turns a lot easier with like Sweetberry, for example. You got Cecilia, the original one, and this is where it can kind of vary. You can play 2, you can play 4. It's really totally up to you. I feel like it's consistent enough where I copied David Sung's list where I can just like have the 2 and kind of really just focus on these cards. Again, you can recycle cards, and you have G guards that recycle cards too, so it's not just your main deck cards, but your G guards can recycle your Cecilia Reverses. So it's not like I never really had a situation where I missed out, but it's just really there in case during the battle phase you're extending and you're looking for a Cecilia card to call to be able to do another one. That's when it really comes up, but most of the time you just want to make sure you have that one copy to even do like a second Vanguard attack to begin with. So this could also be in the early game if you're going first. Again, the first skill, it can attack and call too, so you get 5 attacks that way. Cecilia, the original, it's basically, it just sets up your board during the main phase. It's an act. It's the essence of Musketeers, where you're decked in and you're retiring your current units to proc effects, and also just leaving the deck with triggers, right? So that way your drive checks are more and more threatening, and any other effects that might be more likely to activate, such as Saud. 2 usurps, that's really all you need. You technically maybe only need 1 to even do the combo, but just having the 2 is nice because you can actually call both of them. So if you rewrite, you'll call both of them, and then you can attack, and then this one can be just fodder for retiring, or it could be for locking. It really just depends what you have in that situation, so it's just helpful having the 2 too. And the grade 3 heals, they're just there to help you survive. At the same time, your Cecilias are really going to be in deck, and you're going to be calling them out from deck, so you need other grade 3s to pitch for strike. So this could come up besides the crit frauders, or the usurps in your hand, or paying the cost of strike with 2 cards. It's just another option there too on top of that as well. So for the grade 2s, we are playing 13 grade 2s. We're playing 4 Sivia, 2 Vavila, 4 Saul, 2 Alania, and 1 Augusto. So with the core of Musketeers, you're going to see Sylvia and Saul. Sylvia is literally on place, whether it be Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you just call plant token. That's how you start seeing these cards in action and start populating your board. Great for early game. It's great for also the setup. That way you can like lock fodder. So it's a 2, it's almost like 2 cards for 1 kind of thing. During the battle phase, it's also a way to make sure that even though you call like a Cecilia Reverse and a Sylvia, then the token could be the second body where you can lock those 2 and then have the Cecilia Reverse be able to rewrite as well still, which is like phenomenal. So it's one of those key plays that you want to have in mind as you kind of go through the deck. Saud is, I've been talking about this card, so like what does it actually do is that when it's placed onto Vanguard or Rearguard, as long as you have a Musketeer Vanguard, you can retire 1 Rearguard and Soul Blast 1, and then you check the top 3 for any unit, and you can call it, and if it was so happened to be a trigger, you can counterblast 1 and activate that trigger's effect as part of a skill. You finish resolving that with the trigger skill before you start proccing the rest of your rearguards that you may have in the queue to activate. And that's where you can activate, even in the early game, a potential crit. There's actually a Musketeer crit that's actually really good to call. And you can also activate heals and just heal back to 0 damage. And you can have like this early game where your opponent's like, crap, they're filling up the board with tokens and units, and he just healed back to 0. Wow, you know, you can really fight for that first stride a lot easier too with this deck. So just capitalize where you want to use the skill. And again, you can use this with the G-Guard play, where you can call this, fetch for a potential trigger, activate it, and it makes it a lot easier. And then you can just intercept with it on top of that. So more shield to you at that point. Now, going into more of the text choices, I think there's room for trying out a couple things. And I think the biggest thing is just thinking about like the long game and some utility aspects. And what I mean by that is like a card like Favila. And David Song actually had to like kind of break this down with me, is that you need to make sure that you still have that lock front card. So you may be going against matchups that not only can get rid of your pieces, but retire them. And all they have to do is really get rid of the Cecilia Reverse that's attacking, or the other front row, and you can't have that second Vanguard attack. This is where if it sees another Musketeer being placed, this GB1, you can choose a unit and this unit to get plus 6k, and they both get resists. You give Cecilia Reverse and this unit in the front row both resist, so literally they're untouchable. So it guarantees you to be able to lock them with your own skill and rewrite the Cecilia Reverse, and so you're good to go. So super impactful. It's also a way to give that Cecilia Reverse power, especially if you plan to restand it as their rear guard instead, or even before you rewrite it. There's a way, there's different places you can go about it, but it's just like more power to that rear guard column in a sense too. And it's a Musketeer on top of that, so it's just helpful. The last Musketeer here is Augusto. I was playing Augusto at 2. I made some rooms, I think in the grade 1 slots, if I remember correctly. So David was playing 2 of these, and then I think Casual was playing 2 as well in his deck profile. He just doesn't come up as much for me as of me playtesting, really. And so it's really when it's placed, you can retire 1 or more other rearguards in your back row, and it gets plus 5k attack and shield, depending on how many you retired. And if you retired at least 2, you can return 2 Musketeers, normal units, yeah, normal units, and actually draw a card. Some of them are very specific with normal units, and you can return triggers, and it kind of helps with that whenever it does come up. But for me, it hasn't really come up as much, so I just have the one. You can play the other grade 2 Musketeer, I think Peony Torre, I think that's her name, but it is a counterblast, and it only calls Musketeer cards, and we are playing non-Musketeer cards even in the triggers. And as you already can see, the grade 3 are Serp, and then of course Alania is not a Musketeer, so it just, you know, weigh the pros and cons for yourself and try things out for yourself. So that's my recommendation. And Alania too is really cool. So she's when it's placed from hand, you can counterblast, soul blast 1, call grade 2 or less, and it gets plus 5k power. So this helps you have some early game if you need to fight for it. This also interacts with the G-Guard plate, so you can call it from your hand with Rain Breath, then use its skill to fetch maybe a Hanali from the drop, and then set up the Hanali that way, where your opponent's like, Hanali is like not in their hand, I can go hand with all these attacks, and then all of a sudden, nope, Alania grabs it and fetches it for me, and it really throws them off guard. You could even go Alania into Sau and then potentially get a trigger, but that's like 2 counterblasts potentially and a soul blast, so be mindful of that. But then you can like double intercept on top of that, so you can do a lot of crazy plays. So this is something that I think Alania has a place in there, but you could always try out different cards too. So we are playing 12 grade 1s. We're playing 3 Roof, 2 split of the Sweet Berries. We have Susana, we have Hanali, we have Ajula, we have Spiritual Body Condensation, and we have the Kiera, which is the Musketeer grade 1 PG. So let's cover the basics first. So we have 3 Roof. This essentially, like, if you ride as Vanguard, you can generate a token, and if your opponent's a grade 1 or greater, you can generate 2 tokens and stuff. So that's where you can start building the field. I know that Casual had mentioned that you can build a column of tokens, and you have a 10k column, and you can have some early aggression starting at grade 1. You could put them in the back row just to set up for like a Sau next turn, and just have a Vanguard swing that's powered up by a token too, making it hard to like 1 pass it or 2 pass it. So or just 1 pass it in general because it's grade 1. But anyway, things like that. But the other skill is a rearguard circle skill. When this unit or another unit is placed from deck into rearguard circle, you can retire this unit and countercharge. So this is one of your main ways of countercharging. Super helpful, and it's just really cool because it can make room for other things like a token going to be generated as you're calling multiple units. So just be mindful, and it's that synergy where you can get your resources back to keep extending. And the 2-2 split with Sweet Berry, obviously we talked the G-Arrow one, that's where you could fetch your Cecilia Reverses like directly, which is vital. But we also have the V series one, and the reason is because one, it's also a 10k shield, 8k body, but it's also the skill where it's on place, you generate a token, and then if you're on grade 3 or greater, you can soul charge 1 as well. So this helps build the soul. There are some cards that use soul, so it's super helpful just to have a healthy size soul. And we do have a counter charger over here that uses the soul, so it's just like, you know, cards, even Spiritual Body Condensation, for example. So, and sometimes like the original Cecilia, she gets full power if she sees a grade 3 in soul, and you can kind of sneak in a grade 3 into soul that way randomly if that comes up. It's rare obviously, but it's there. The second skill to continuous, if you're at grade 3 or greater, it gets plus 5k in general. So it's a 13k attacker, 13k booster, really nice in that aspect. So we have these 5 techs, I guess I would call them. I guess I'll start with the 2 Musketeers on the edges. We have Susana over here. This is a very old card. It's 5k base, as you can see it, but when it's placed, you can soul blast 2 and counter charge 2. So now you can start seeing like, wow, you can massively counter charge, so you can really go ham with your Cecilia's turn by turn basis and other card effects like Saul. So there's no like constraining of counterblast, so it's just very helpful just having a card like this too. And these cards can happen during the battle phase, which is even greater. The Musketeer PG one, I think it's cool because it's a grade 1. So if you're searching for a Sweet Berry, you can search for any of these and add them to hand with the Stride Ladislava. So you'll call this and you can search a Susana, you can search for a Hanali, you can search for a grade 1 PG, a Spiritual Body Condensation, and a Jula. So like super helpful because you can defend easier with the grade 1 PG if you need it. Remember, it guards Musketeer units, so that's key. But its second skill is really nice too because it has a drop zone skill where it can bottom deck this and another card, and then you can actually give a Musketeer plus 2k. But the effect, it's really the cost that you want. You can return triggers, so you can return crits over triggers. You can recycle your Cecilia Reverses if you need to too as well. I've done that multiple times, one way or the other too, so it's just a helpful card to recycle. This actually comes up more often than Augusto for me, so if that gives you any reference for those playing the deck. And we have Spiritual Body Condensation. This is something that I'm trying. If you're playing against a lot of Murakami, I would recommend switching Spiritual Body Condensation for a Bell. So that way you can actually get your binding units back and you're able to deal with that matchup a lot better too. But Spiritual Body Condensation is more of a consistency. You can Soul Blast one, grab something from drop zone and use it immediately. So this is super helpful, getting like a Sweet Berry, a Counter Charger if you really need to, and other cards that might come up like an Arjula as well. If they end up in the drop zone somehow, like maybe they hit damage and then you heal from it. It's one way to fetch that. And what's cool is Ladislava can grab it too, so you immediately add it to hand while you call something else that's useful onto the field. Hanali and Arjula. Hanali, again, matchup, less attacks. You can turn off Hanali if you lock it with Cecilia Reverse's skill too, so it doesn't hurt you in the lightest at all. It's just knowing when to do it, so just be mindful of that. And then you have Arjula, which is great for like even dealing with those matchups that are disruptive. So if you don't have the grade 2 Favila, you can search for the Arjula, and now that column is protected. So as long as you know that you can't get that front row like disruptive, Arjula is there to help you with that single column. And what's really cool is that because the Ursa Dragon will keep showing up, reviving itself every time you ride onto Vanguard, it'll protect those too. Like it'll continuously protect those rear guards as they're popping in and out into that 4 stacked rear guard circle. So it's really cool in that aspect. And if you want to move around in your rolls, sure, that helps. It doesn't come up as often, but sometimes you end up with grade 2s in the back because you're just trying to call tokens and move them at appropriate places. Like I put stuff behind the Vanguard that probably shouldn't go behind the Vanguard, but it can help with that. But it's just one of those things. Onto the remaining triggers, we're playing 8 crit in total, 4 Musketeer, 4 the strike crits, 3 PG draws, 1 Blessed Favor, stoicheia over trigger, and then the starter, obviously. I think you could have any other starter, but it's a Musketeer just in case it comes up, but it rarely comes up, so you can play anything you want as long as you get a ticket shield. So the key things to point out are the crits. So when this Musketeer crit is placed by an effect from deck, you can countercharge too. That's big, like for real, for a crit. Like holy crap, is really that good. So you can activate Sau and have that crit pressure, but you're also refunding yourself, so you can keep going, and it's just super helpful. And you can really like extend further if you need to, like where like maybe your opponent only puts you at 1 or 2 damage. This way it refunds that back and you can keep going. Your opponent's like, ah, crap, I didn't think you would be still this aggressive. The strike crits, again, you're calling Cecilia Reverses from deck, and so you need ways to stride efficiently. It's always appreciative. Draw PG, again, we're only playing one of the grade 1 PGs, so might as well use the draws for draw power. You can activate this Sau and draw a card, so it gives you more power, more advantage that way too. And then during the battle phase, because you're rewriting, you're having multiple drive checks, so you're seeing like your triple drive from your strides, then the twin drive from Cecilia Reverse, and then if you did another Cecilia Reverse, that's another twin drive for a total of 5 to 7 card drive checks. So if you're hitting draws throughout, you start building a massive hand a lot easier too. Over trigger is just good it's an omni trigger essentially, so it's just really good. The OT from Crane Elemental, it gives power to 2 units, but you're locking the front row, so it's just like really stacked on this, and then most of the time you don't boost because you still need that body to be standing to be able to lock, so it's just weirdly awkward. So you might as well do the Blessed Favor. Onto the strides. Onto the strides. We were playing 9 strides. We're playing 3 Ladislava, 2 Lieta, 1 Invierno, 1 Sandrine, 1 Zoa, and 1 Mega Loma. So honestly, most of the time you're gonna go into Ladislava and then Lieta and then Invierno, and that's pretty much it. These are like very situational, these bottom 3 over here. So again, Ladislava, you can search for your key pieces, which is vital. The second skill is a way to be more aggressive too if you do have the resources. So when this unit attacks, you can kind of blast 1. If you have 2 or more rear guards with the same name, you can restand them. So it kind of gives you like a Lambros type of effect, which is really cool. And this is actually pretty vital against like Mega Calling, because you can't do squat of calling stuff from deck at all from against like a Gridora stride. So this elites you, if you have multiple copies of something, you can at least get multiple attacks, and if they stun them, you can restand them too as well, so you still have some pressure there. This is really your saving grace, but outside of that, it's really your consistent searching, making sure your turns are solid, so you're doing double Vanguard attacks. I would suggest 3. It's really the saving grace right now for Neo Nectar. This is where I was talking about earlier. It's just like, dang, like there's only so many options, and a lot of the other options that are actually pretty good are restricted to the bloom ability, and VR just didn't have that anymore, and for some reason even moving forward it's gone away from that, so it's just like very limiting in that aspect. And Lieta is one of those units where it can counterblast, flip itself, and then depending on how many cards you have face up in the G zone +1, you can call that many of the name itself. And what's really cool is that it also, you can put a card into Soul, up to 1 if you want to, but then it gets all the names from the Soul as well. So you can have multiple Cecilias in the Soul, or maybe you have a grade 2s like the token generators. You can call as many as those depending on how many you have face up cards +1. So you can really easily set up double Cecilia Reverse if you want to get a restanding rearguard and then a restanding vanguard in a sense, and other field setup, especially if you have nothing to work with. Lieta helps you with that, so you build a field for nothing potentially too. You have Invierno. This one is literally for the first skill. It's an act. You Soul Blast 1, choose any normal units from your drop or rearguard circle and return them to your deck and shuffle. And then of course if you return 5, you'll countercharge and soul charge. So it refunds itself with the soul, but it also countercharges. But more importantly, it returns your pieces that you need. And it doesn't matter if you waste a stride on this, because if you literally needed to return a Cecilia Reverse and you have a sweet barrier to grab it, you can still do double Vanguard attack. It's still that, right? Remember, Ladislava is only helpful for the first skill most of the time. The second skill, you really don't use that often unless you have like the surplus of Counterblast to work with. So that in itself is pretty cool. The next card is Sandrine. So this card doesn't come as often, but it's just nice to have. It's the G-Zone effect. If you retire 2 plant tokens and Counterblast 1, and if both of you are grade 3 or greater, you can stride this and it gets plus 10k in the crits. And so that's pretty cool. Typically, I think of Marduk from like Regalia, but this is very restrictive, so it's not as like busted. And at the same time, you can do effects like Invierno, so, and then do this to have a double crit pressure, a double crit Vanguard pressure if you want to, and then still do the rewrite afterwards. So your Vanguard would go from Invierno to Sandrine to like a Cecilia Reverse, and then and whoever Cecilia you ride with, right? So it's just kind of like those plays that you can do, like, okay, let me be aggressive, recycle, and all this kind of stuff. So the package for the Zoa and the Megaloloma, Zoa has not come up for me. The downside with Zoa is that it calls from hand, so it doesn't work with the Cecilios because they need to be called from deck. That's the downside. Again, if it's 999 something, if it hits, your opponent loses. So if they have no PG Sentinel, game, right? And then Megaloloma is interesting. This is a card that I actually want to spend a minute on. And this is the card when you place it, you discard 2 more cards, and essentially the next turn when your opponent deals the damage and you would lose, you essentially return your hand and you return all your damage, and then you shuffle your deck and then put 5 cards on the top to the damage zone, and then you live. Essentially, you're back to 5 damage, and it ends the turn for your opponent. So it ends their turn immediately too. Most of the time, it's not used in any Zoo Nation at all, really, to be honest. But guess what? You can do this, set that up. The effect is onto the player, so you have it. So, but then if you have a Cecilia Reverse and you rewrite over it, you can still have double Vanguard attack. And then the next turn, if you do lose, because if you know you're gonna lose and you want to have some aggression with it, you just restart your turn and then you go into your turn. And if you can, you can straight into late time, and you can actually just rebuild the field for nothing and just like potentially seal the deal. This hasn't come up as much, but the concept and the theory is there. It's actually pretty nutty if you really think about it. So that's why I just wanted to share at least a minute with it too. Onto the G guards. We're playing a surplus with G guards. Honestly, you can reduce 1 or 2 of these and make room for the strides. But again, there's only so many good strides for Neo Nectar. So there's 2 Rain Breath, 2 Robertina, 1 Costarina, 1 Dismo, and 1 Antero. So the Rain Breath, again, calls from hand, gets plus 5k shield. Not only that, it gives that unit resist. So imagine just calling the Honolite and give it resist. They can't even retire it during the battle phase, like with a Cannoneer that's called from a Night Storm, or a Gembolt if it still has an attack from Aqua Force. So think about it like that. That's really cool. You have Robertina, or Costarina, I should say. That's the GB1 flip, and it's a counterblast, and it calls something from hand. So if you run a rain blast, you can use this, but you had to have like also what's the word I'm looking for? If you have 2 or more of the same copy, it also gets shield too on top of that. So if you need bigger shield, that might be an option. And if you want to use the counterblast, it works with that. Robertina is the card that you probably will use most games. It's the new G guard on top of Ladislava from the premium collection of 2022. And essentially, when you guard with it, you can return up to 2 units from your rearguard circle or your drop zone and shuffle them. And then, of course, if there were the up to 2 cards of the same name, they had to be the same name, I should say. And if you did, then you can countercharge and it gets plus 15k shield. So it's a really big shield, recycles your Cecilia Reverses, your Saus, and so on, and you countercharge on top of that. That's super nice. Like I said, that there's a lot of good countercharge management, not only during your turn, but even on your opponent's turn. So you go to your turn, you set up really well. Especially if for whatever reason you go into Zoa and you need that 2 counterblast to start with, this can help with that, or catch them from surprise. And Dismal is there to protect your rearguards. Again, if you have Cecilia Reverse, you can protect it with a Dismal too. The reason that you would protect an existing Cecilia Reverse is because when you call another one, this one can see that one and use that skill as well. So you have double Cecilia Reverse potentially the following turn, if that makes sense, for you at that turn. Also, if you so happen to have like a Hanali just chilling, you can just give it resist and it cannot be hit kind of thing too, if you have to deal with that too. Antaro is one of the bigger shields, Soul Blast 1, it gets plus 5k, but then if you have 1 or less or 4 or more, it gets an additional 15. Yeah, 15. So very big shield, so it could come up, just nice to have in that respect. So I'm going to demonstrate a high roll kind of type of play. Other than that, you can kind of go from there if you don't have the high roll. This is using 5 counterblasts. Let's say you actually you did a prior turn, so you have double force marker here. You have 2 tokens that you generate your stride. Your Vanguard is still there, and you set up for like double Cecilia Reverse, and you have Ladislava as your Vanguard. You have the usurps in the drop zone ready to go too. And I just kind of wanted to show this. So in this example, I'm going to use both abilities of Ladislava, and so I already set up already for the first one, but the second one will restand the 2. So this will be the first attack for 13. This will be for 23. And then on attack, counterblast 1. Restand the 2, and any drive checks you put it onto this one, of course. Now this is where the sequencing actually does matter. So you're going to attack with this one, and then at the end of the battle you're going to counterblast with this one to activate that skill and lock 2 cards from behind. So let's say you do the 2 tokens, so they disappear immediately, and this will restand. And if you have any triggers like crits and stuff, this will also see the benefit for another attack with those benefits. And now activate its skill for this copy to counterblast and lock these 2 that are standing. And now because you have a front one, you're going to reride your Vanguard. This goes back to the G zone. So if you're curious how that works, it just goes back to the G zone face up, and you'll get an additional force marker for 3 now. And guess what? Do you see that? So both our SERPs come into the field this way, so you can kind of see that. And now each card that sees these force markers will get the benefit of that. So a SERP can attack, and this will be plus 30. So this will be 43 with a SERP. And again, the Cecilia Reverse that restood itself, it saw that power up too as well, from the 2 force markers that it had at the time. So super key in that respect. You're asking for a lot of shield. And when this attacks now, you can use the skill to counterblast 1 and retire both of them. And then you check the top 5. And here's where it can get kind of nutty. And this is why 2 tokens actually matter in this case. So let's say you find these 2. So you call the last Cecilia Reverse. It could be even the regular Cecilia if you want to. And you can even call this one over here. And then when it's called, guess what? You generate a token. And you can call it right here as well. And you do your drive checks, so twin drive, stack it onto this Cecilia as well. Now this is going to attack, not boosted at all. And now this or that will trigger. Either way is fine because this is a new Vanguard technically. And it also loses the triggers because it binds itself and then rewrites, so just keep mind of that. You'll use the skill again to counterblast, lock 2 standing units, the token disappears. Read ride, get another force marker. So now you have 4. And you can call double usurp again because you did retire them earlier technically. And now you are out of counterblast, so you're not going to retire, so you can attack with Vanguard for another twin drive. So you'll see a total of 3, 2, 2. So that's what 5 plus 2. That's 7. 7 drive checks this turn, and then you stack the last 2 onto this observe. This is 13k with 4 force markers at a minimum, so 53k. So this is very strong in that respect. And again, this assumes that they don't have anything with disruption. This is kind of the high roll of the high roll plays. There's another variation that you can do and just focus on just rewriting. There might be a way to get another Cecilia rewrite. I don't know, but it's just, you know, things to mess with. And I wanted to show this off. If you want to see more intricate combos, I would recommend seeing also Casual's combo video too. He also kind of slows down on some other basic plays that you can do too. And that's it, amigos, for the deck profile. I hope you really enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot from it. I know it was a lot of in-depthness. This deck is really fun. If you're a player that likes to spend time in a deck and do the intricacies, and you're actually pretty rewarded really well with this deck too. And it reminds me a lot of Grand Blue Premium. So if you really like Grand Blue already, this is definitely a deck that you'll enjoy too as well. It'll get you thinking a little bit differently because a lot of it's from the deck purely. But you're able to recycle stuff like I mentioned, which Grand Blue actually doesn't have recycling compared to Neo Nectar. So it's a whole different ball game too. Now, if there is a deck that basically takes the recycling into Grand Blue, that would be very busted at this point, right? But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, especially if you're playing, let's say, Musketeers in the V Premium format and wanted to see more premium version of it. This is definitely something to look at and try out for yourself. For me, it is more of a fun deck too, but you can take it to locals and do fairly well with it, especially for people that don't see it. I know Casual, I had mentioned in his video where you can G-guard and call over, let's say your opponent's Vanguard attacks a rearguard, and you can call over an existing rearguard. It kind of like negates that attack because that rearguard's no longer there. But the Vanguard will still get the drive checks though, just so you know. So I think the other cards like Bermuda can bounce rearguards, so it does the same thing. But your opponent will still get the drive checks, but you get to like cancel attacks like that way. But it doesn't come up, but I wanted to clear that as well. I even commented in this video too. So really good stuff, really good player too. And again, shout out to David and his friend too for this. And shout out to 50 Card Shop for hooking me up with the SPs. Super awesome. And if you want to level up your gaming, check out Nex LvL Gaming. I have a 10% discount in the affiliated link in the description below for playmats, dice, you name it. And then, of course, use the TCG Player One if you want to shop through them as well.
Why, hello there. Jaime, it's Atlas from Nexus at Night. If you want to see what this deck looks like in V Premium and how to change it into Premium with minimal changes, check out my channel. I'm covering every clan in Vanguard on how to change from V to Premium. Link in the description.
If you like the video, leave a like, comment down below, and say what you're thinking. What are some things that you like about this deck? And if you tried it or seen it in action, just let me know what you guys think. I love to hear your guys' opinion, and even other cards that are worth trying out, whether it be stoicheia cards or the Musketeer cards. I'm all ears. I'm always wanting to improve this deck just for fun, but also like in a competitive spirit too as well. So without further ado, on to the next one, amigos. Bye!